sit back there and be like, why can't it be on the same level?
Let's get real. Let's get real.
Yeah, maybe might sit on the floor.
Yeah, maybe just cross the flat.
I'm trying to be on the same level. I want this to be like
Oh, I get to sit next to Anita.
I'm talking about yesterday. It's no fun.
No, it was fine.
It's just one of those lessons where not before teachers have
Oh, I've done that. I've turned up at work without mine, and then stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's me all over that. Oh yeah, I just love coming to gym. Coming home. As I've said time and time again, I've said to people, I'm not even a teacher anymore. I've been a teacher for a while now. I'm still like, yeah, well, I don't think it'll be a J conference intern, so part of the furniture now.
Oh, so close. That's a good action. I like that.
That's brilliant. But you know, and also your background. Kind of...
You want to check the camera? I think the audio we used was the laptop.
Right.
Oh, I think it was the same. Yeah, let me know which one it is.
So much easier for me.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. You want to check the camera? Yeah. Camera one's. Yeah. It's also it.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I think it's in my roadmap.
Very, very lucky. I had Ilan come on my podcast, so lucky to have him on my podcast. Yeah, and and I've done some work with Mary Meyer about enhancing literacy in the curriculum, and you take the book and then develop the resources and the so I like Ilan Kelman Disaster by choice. I've got edgy one. You want to?
It's pretty cool now.
Thank you ever so much for joining us today at the third day of the GA conference. Those of you who have been here for 3 days, well done. Takes some stamina, doesn't it? Because you just keep seeing new ideas and you just keep feeling so excited, and then you just go back in the evening and you're just like, whoa. So thank you very much for those of you that have been here before, and a massive welcome to those of you that have joined us for the first day today. Absolutely lovely to see you. It is going to be an incredible day. And we have a great keynote lecture now. I am very excited that Ilan has agreed to come from London to do this. I don't feel like I really need to introduce him because I'm sure you all know exactly who he is and have read Disaster by Choice and reread it and have got a dog-eared copy of it with post-it notes in the different pages, because Ilan's book has been so influential to our geography education community. Personally, it has, I'm not exaggerating when I say it's radically changed how I teach about disasters and really made me move much more towards the idea of disasters being a choice, obviously, but this idea of, you know, the decisions we make being so important, and that intersection between physical and human geography. And the way that Ilan has managed to do the research, write the book, and communicate in such a clear way. I use chapter for the book with my year 8s, and they can comprehend the message that's coming across because of the excellent way it's written. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome Ilan to talk to us today, and I'm sure you are going to get a great deal out of this session. Over to you.
When we think disasters, we think geography. Disasters are about people, places, and times. Even thinking about this photo on the screen which I took, I'm certain you all know why. 11th March 2011, many of you teach that, or future geographers, I presume you've been learning about what happened on that day. The irony, of course, being that sign went up after the 11th of March 2011. The importance of the times, of changes through time, and of people making decisions about places to have a disaster or not have a disaster. Basically, the fundamental geography questions. When I put this up when I'm giving talks in schools, and yeah, pro tip, academics will be delighted to come into the secondary schools, primary schools, and give talks. We are fully salaried, so we basically give it for free, maybe train fare expenses, but generally just ask. You might need to give some direction, like don't put up a lot of graphs and don't put up a lot of numbers. Often just tell the stories, be yourself, and that can be very hard for academics. But yes, we absolutely are delighted to come into schools, and particularly, for example, selling our degrees. At UCL, we have the country's only Global Humanitarian Studies bachelor's degree, a 3-year degree in studying disasters, and then for some of the undergraduates in the room, we also have a Master of Disasters degrees, because we absolutely love this approach to education, whether it's secondary school or tertiary education, to ask these questions about people, places, and time. And when I do put up this photo on the screen in talks, there's obviously the question, I can use it with or without the location. If it's without the location, can you guess where it is? If it's with the location, well then why are there 2 languages on that sign? And it's that decision by people to say, my Japanese isn't particularly good, as in I have 0 words in written and spoken Japanese, but yet I travel to Japan. That sign is very helpful for me in order to help me avoid a disaster. But of course, if you don't read either language, or if you may not read any language, how much does that sign help? I mean, to me, it seems to be instructing that you have to open up a portal in the ground and then jump in the portal. We have an absolutely brilliant visualizer in the audience who perhaps, put your hand up, so people know, who perhaps can assist in thinking about the images that we see and thinking about the people who created them for the places and how this might evolve over time in order to support people in doing much better than was done on the 11th of March, 2011. And people try, they do their best. This was an emergency operations center on that day. As soon as the earthquake happened, they knew what was coming. And they were sending out messages by any means, any mechanism. This is a tsunami, you need to evacuate now. The water came in, inundated the ground floor, went up and covered the first floor. They evacuated to the second floor, continued sending out messages. The water then reached the second floor, and at that point they realized they may not get out of this. So they started sending messages to their families and to their friends. Many of them evacuated to the roof, and you see right at the top that radio mast. About 24 of them, including the town's mayor, ended up clinging to that radio mast as the water came up above the roof, swept away about half of them, and 12 of them survived. They left this building, this ex-emergency operations center, as a memorial to remember that day, to thank those who gave their lives, and to say we can and should do better. People made those decisions. People gave up their lives to help others in this place at that time. And the key has to be, we don't want this. Geography in teaching about these stories, geography in saying, but there was a long history of tsunamis in that area, and Japan had done so well in terms of preparing for earthquakes. Why not tsunamis? These are the questions in order to reach solutions. Not just laying blame, not just saying, oh, well, you should have known, you should have done that. That is part of it, but it's not necessarily the best or most productive way forward. It's using geography for resolution. It's using geography to do better. Also recognizing this was not the only major tsunami. This was not the only time that we have learned or should have learned lessons from tsunamis. The other one, which I know many of you teach, many of you learn, was 26th December 2004. This is a memorial to the 84 Norwegians who died on that day. It's on the fjord, beautiful scenery just outside of Oslo. And again, I show this slide and think, well, hang on, think geography. How close is Norway to the Indian Ocean? And get the students to talk about that. And then the question is, well, then why did so many Norwegians die on that day? And get those answers to be thinking about what people do, the fact we all travel. You know, it's all nice being in an absolutely gorgeous city right now, surrounded by 7 hills, far inland. We don't have to worry about tsunamis. Except that, like Norwegians, we travel. Again, the importance of education, of learning, of recognizing we change our environments, and therefore we change the hazard environment in which we are in. Same with Sweden. You can tell how much fun I am on holiday visiting all the disaster memorials. Yesterday I did my stroll up to the Hillsborough Memorial. Today I visited the Collar Memorial just up the hill from here. Walking through those waves of grass, it's the same design as the Norway one, but on a far larger scale. You can see the cars in the background. Walking through those waves of grass is just very powerful to get to that plaque in the center, which lists the names of every single one of the 543 Swedes who died on that day, with 3 times as many seriously injured. Think of those numbers in a country of 10 million people. Who would have remained untouched in Sweden on the 26th of December 2004? If you're in London or ever visiting, in the Natural History Museum at South Kensington is a tsunami memorial to 155 UK-affiliated people who died in that tsunami. One name which is not on that list is Tilly Smith. She was on holiday in Thailand with her parents and younger sister. On that morning, she was just walking along the shore, and suddenly, oh, the sea is behaving funny. Well, wait a minute. 2 weeks ago in geography class, my teacher, Mr. Kearney, Andrew Kearney, said, when the sea is doing that, it must be a tsunami. She talked to her parents. Her parents were a bit skeptical. Eventually managed to convince them. They went to the hotel security guard, who believed what was going on and evacuated the beach. About 100 people went into the hotel, went up to the first floor. The tsunami waves swept. Tsunami waves is not a single wave. And in fact, the second and third tsunami waves tend to be the most destructive. So about 100 people went into the hotel, up to the first floor. The tsunami wave swept in, went through the ground floor, absolutely obliterated the beach. No one died on that beach. Andrew Kearney, Tilly Smith saved about 100 lives on that day, which means you need to tell your students that the moral is listen to your geography teacher. Individuals can make a difference. Geography is about people. It's not just the individuals, though. There are many things which we cannot do on our own, should not do on our own. That's why we have government. That's why we have elections. And should absolutely exercise our right to vote. 7th May is coming up for those in places where there are elections. Again, to bring in that ethos of making a positive difference, of saying, but we have the knowledge. We had the knowledge in 2004, we had the knowledge in 2011. What can and should we do better? Trying to make certain that we do not experience this again. Doing what we can individually, but also thinking collectively. I had to visit Honolulu. We make sacrifices for our job. That was actually when I was permitted to enter the US. I still have fond memories of the gunfire every day. But I visited the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center where I took this photo. It started, Pacific Tsunami Warning, started in 1949, consolidated in 1960. If we had it for the Pacific, why did we not have it for the Indian Ocean? Research which I did showed that for more than 30 years before 2004, people had been trying to start an Indian Ocean tsunami warning system, which was based on the successes of the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. Excellent question for the students. Why did it not happen? Why did people deem there to be other priorities? Who is making the decisions? And on what basis? A lot of standard answers come through. Well, Indian Ocean, we're talking about Indonesia, we're talking about Seychelles, we're talking about Bangladesh, we're talking about Somalia. Those are poor countries, right? What I teach at undergraduate and master's level, there is no such thing as a poor country. Of course, there are plenty of countries with lots of poor people. People, places, and how long it took to create the abject poverty that we see in these places, and why we're not choosing to solve it when we have money. Or how long it took to create the abject poverty in, say, the United Kingdom. I don't think we should mention Margaret Thatcher in the city. And decisions, people who are possibly not making the decision to try and alleviate that poverty. We have the knowledge. We have the skills, we have the money, we have the resources. They did it in 1949 for the Pacific Ocean. How can we use education? How can we use geography to make a positive difference? And it is happening. They took us to visit this school in Ecuador, which sits in the shadow of an active volcano. They have a phenomenal education system for their students about the volcano, possible volcanic hazards, what they have to do, the possible signs and actions. The kids go back, they talk to their neighbors, their grandparents, their aunts, their uncles, their whole family. It's that ripple effect. Well, not ripple like a tsunami, but you know what I mean. To show the positivity of what geography education can do. As a scientist, though, I don't necessarily take what I'm told. I look around, I think for myself, I ask questions. I looked around the school. I was certainly concerned about earthquakes and whether or not that structure was appropriately designed for earthquakes. Even worse is that door, that classroom door opening inwards. Fire exits, as we see at the back there, should open outwards. Straightforward reason, if and when the fire alarm goes off, typically when rather than if, and people are piling up, if someone trips, creates a crowd blockage and people are piling up against the door, a door opening outward means that people will get out and there's no crowd crush. Again, very sadly and absolutely horrifically thinking of Hillsborough. When that door opens inwards, if there's some sort of block or someone cannot get it open, they crush up against the door. They cannot get out. We don't get the fire disaster, we get the crush disaster. People thinking or not thinking, doing well for volcanic eruptions, not doing so well necessarily for earthquakes or for fires. Decisions, choices. How geographers can then say, just replace the door. How we can look around our own classrooms in our own schools and say, actually, am I ready for when that fire alarm goes off. And I've been in some schools where I look at the fire exit and whoops, it actually opens inwards. Or it's not even marked as a fire exit and it's the only door to exit that classroom. What can we as individuals do? Particularly when I'm walking around UCL and I see a fire extinguisher propping open a fire door that says fire door keep shut. We can make those choices, we can make those decisions. Education in different ways. It's not just in the classroom. It's absolutely wonderful to see you all here. The association does phenomenal work, and huge thanks to Catherine for the invitation and for all the work that she, past and future presidents, have done. This education does not stop in the classroom. We absolutely do contribute in different ways, and the magazine which the association puts out with Routledge, I do have an article in there from 2024, which is about disaster by choice. They very kindly made it free to download this month. So please go on, tell me what's wrong with the article, we need feedback. You are the experts in education. I pretend to be a teacher at the master's and undergraduate level, but fundamentally I'm a scientist. You are the experts. What more do you need from that article or from the book or from standing on the stage or from coming to your schools or from conversations? Because the teaching, the education is not just about the classroom. It's also about the public. If we think about New Zealand and the time when it was invaded, settled, how the British colonialists were thinking about setting up a country, and it's almost like they looked at the islands and they said, what's the most dangerous place in this archipelago? I'll put my capital city there. It really is terrifying walking around downtown Wellington. But they're doing what they can. And this is a National Museum Te Papa, where they've implemented local earthquake engineering, Kiwi technology, as well as educating. This is a base isolator. It isolates the building from the ground. So if you have the earth and you're building and the earth shakes, the building shakes with it. If you isolate it by putting a rubber accordion between the building and the ground, then when the earth shakes, the building shakes less because that rubber accordion takes up some of the vibrations. And different people have invented base isolators. This is the local New Zealand technology that they are using to completely isolate that National Museum Te Papa, which would then potentially be one of the safest places in Wellington, but they just don't stop at it because your base isolator is underneath. It's completely hidden. So they've cut down so that people can walk down, look at the base isolator, and actually see it, as well as the educational panels. This is geography education. This is for everyone. Again, though, as a scientist, do I accept what I'm told? So I walked back up the stairs and took a look around. I thought, whoa, hang on a minute. This is reclaimed land, and they've built a museum on reclaimed land in an earthquake zone. So those of you who teach earthquakes know the L word, liquefaction, which caused extensive damage in the Christchurch 22 February 2011 earthquake. Your building can be perfectly structurally engineered to withstand vibrations. The land underneath liquefies, the building topples. And second, gorgeous view from the patio of Wellington Harbour. You have a glass of water, you push it, that water sloshes back and forth. If you have a bay and you push it in an earthquake, that water sloshes back and forth, it effectively creates a tsunami. That's called cessation. Liquefaction and cessation, major issues in significant earthquake zones, particularly in New Zealand, but many other places. They've done very well for base isolation. We don't know what they've necessarily done for cessation or liquefaction. Speaking of Christchurch, 22nd February 2011, the art gallery was one of the few buildings in the central business district to remain undamaged. They used it as a staging post and as a temporary emergency operations center. After that earthquake, they re-engineered the entire art gallery. They basically lifted it up, put in base isolators. So I was there last year. This is a photo that I took in the underground parking garage, where every single pillar has a base isolator on which the art gallery sits. Again, Kiwi technology, absolutely thinking about the vibrations, because it did okay in 2011, probably liquefaction is not necessarily a huge concern on that block, although that 2011 earthquake was nothing compared to the Transalpine one, which they are expecting. It's an excellent example of going to a place and you go to the art gallery, why don't you go to an underground parking garage? Again, that's very interesting on holiday. If you know it's there, it's worthwhile looking at. But if you don't know it's a base isolator, you wouldn't necessarily know. This is what geography teaches us. To look around, to learn, to guess, to hypothesize, to think, to corroborate. Why people made a decision, what the place is, and how long it took to make that decision. Again, the art gallery did so well on the 2nd of September 2010 and 22 February 2011, even though it wasn't base isolated. Why didn't they base isolate it? So I get invited to Azerbaijan to give a keynote. In the airport afterwards, I'm looking around, and I'm fairly certain those are earthquake engineering measures. This one, just looking at the structural design, it seems to be absolutely set in order to try and absorb those vibrations and distribute it. We don't necessarily know what's in those columns or beams, and this is the challenge with earthquake engineering. Everything which is appropriate is covered up by the paint or the finishes or subsequent layers. The design looks excellent. How will it behave? Well, there's one test that counts. And then there's that line running through the floor. And my guess is that's what's called a seismic gap. I don't know, I'm guessing. A seismic gap is where they create either weaker tiles or bricks, which will then get crushed in an earthquake when the two parts of the airport move in an earthquake, or that panel may actually flip up, leaving that gap for the two parts of the airport to move in an earthquake. Of course, when you go to the end, you see the seeds, which are over that panel. If it flips up, will that prevent them from flipping up, or will the forces actually just knock the seeds over? I don't know. These are the questions to ask. If we're interested, can we get the design drawings? Can we get the design specs? Do we know that it was built to the design specs? And we don't. As the saying goes, earthquakes don't kill people. Collapsing infrastructure does. Why does infrastructure collapse? Poor design, corruption, deliberate, malevolent, inadvertent. Earthquakes don't kill people. Corruption does. One of the aphorisms is the biggest cause of death in any and all disasters is corruption. Again, just looking around, seeing these aspects, asking the questions, wondering who made the choices, over what time frame, how long will they last, what difference, positive or hopefully not negative, will it make for a place like Baku, Azerbaijan? Thinking about other places, you're walking through a park, you come across this, and realize, oh yeah, you know what, it's a disaster memorial. Because back in ancient history, 1954, Hurricane Hazel ripped through Toronto, killing 84 people around Ontario. 1/3 of those deaths happened on a single street, right where this memorial is, that street called Raymore Drive. As the waters from the Humber River rose and isolated houses, emergency services were called out. Firefighters were just standing by the raging banks, listening to the screams of people asking for help, and they had no equipment, no training, no scope to rescue them. They just had to listen until the screams faded away or suddenly stopped. And some of those firefighters were traumatized for life. In the aftermath of that Hurricane Hazel catastrophe, as well as through a lot of wider municipal governance changes which were affecting Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area at the time, they said that we can't allow this to happen again. And today, Raymore Drive, where 1/3 of those people died, looks like that. You can see the river at the edge there. Toronto said we are not going to put development in the floodplains. They say it's called a floodplain for a reason. I think about geography vocabulary, and we had some of that last night in the Teach Meet. It's called a floodplain because it floods. Rivers do not break their banks. Rivers do what rivers are designed to do. And sometimes that means the water is a bit high, and sometimes that means the water is a bit low. That's what nature does. It's when we build in a place that gets wet that we're going to get wet. And Toronto said we don't want this to happen, so there's these wonderful ravine systems, bike paths, walking paths, playgrounds, recreational areas, environmental education. You go out at dawn, you see a deer walking across the path. If you go out at dusk, you see coyotes running along the riverbank. And actually now probably because the coyotes are coming into residential areas and starting to hunt in pairs, surrounding people and attacking small dogs. Again, different consequences which then have to be managed. But Toronto has said, we don't want another hurricane disaster. People today forget. If you try to build your sort of £1 million McMansions right by the river, beautiful river view, watch the salmon jumping upstream in the autumn, it would never happen because people would object to it. They would say, no, we want our walking places. It's great for physical health. It's great for mental health. The greenery absorbs air pollution so we can actually breathe in this megacity. They forgot it came out of Hurricane Hazel. They forgot it came out of a disaster. Not just theoretically, but practically. 2012, Hurricane Sandy slashes through Toronto. Not as bad as Hurricane Hazel, but still hurricane sideswiping the city. I went out afterwards, and the worst damage that I could find from Hurricane Sandy. So yeah, if you're a cyclist, you might want to be a bit careful. The paths were definitely slick with mud. A couple of fences were knocked down. Large hazard, effectively no disaster. But we don't have to go to the colonies in order to, oh, sorry, did I hear decolonization? We can actually think about our own places. I talk about London because I live there, not because it's the center of the universe. That was meant to be very funny. Ooh, note to self. When north of zone 6, don't mention HS2. Yeah, speaking of disasters, if anyone's seen the movie, the 1984 movie called Threads, which is about Sheffield being taken out by a Russian nuclear missile. And that global nuclear war began in the movie over Iran. Yes, I do sleep well at night. Thank you so much for asking. Back to London, and also recognizing the connection between London and Sheffield for dealing with the disaster of cholera, and how much the city as well as London contributed to eradicating cholera from this country. Again, the reason for the cholera monument just up the hill there. This council in South London made the decision that they didn't want houses to be flooded. They created a green space at the low line point. There's a small bioreserve, there's a playing field, there's paths, there's benches, there's this playground. When it rains a lot, very rare in London and England, when it rains a lot, the water flows into that green space. If that house in the background were flooded by that amount of water, minimum 6 figures damage, minimum 6 months out of house and home. Think of the financial cost, think of the emotional cost. But instead, we have a couple centimeters of water, no disaster, the people aren't out of home. And then it dries, and the playground is there for you. It's a bit muddy, that's okay for kids, right? Kids love mud. In fact, kids love water also. Splashing puddles. Making that choice, making that decision to not have a disaster. Individuals vote for the council, but individuals don't make that council decision. This is about the leaders we have. This is about becoming that leader to make that decision. People for your place, creating something which creates a community green space, like Toronto, good for mental health, good for physical health, good for air pollution, good for recreation, in order to have long-lasting quality of life over time. This used to be a raised motorway, right through the center of a massive city. 2003 to 2005, actually mainly for political reasons, they pulled down the motorway and engineered a river instead. I happened to be there as a typhoon was going by. You can see in the sign they closed it. And they explained why they closed it. An amazing education, communication. And fortunately, my Korean is about as good as my Japanese. Fortunately, it's in a language which I can read and understand, so I know what's going on. I know what I should do. I know what I should not do. People making that decision for that place. And then, when the typhoon isn't going through, when the water isn't rising, it becomes an absolutely gorgeous place to wander out during the day or at night. It's a community center. They hold events there. People are out there reading. And there's greenery. What they found in this part of Seoul was less air pollution. People knew that they couldn't take the motorway to drive through. They stopped driving. The decision to pull down the motorway was coupled with investment in public transport. People knew it was so easy to get to there by just hopping on the air-conditioned, reliable, safe metro system. And then when it rains, as per the typhoon, the water runs off, it doesn't flood the area, and because of the greenery, it also reduces the urban heat on it. Everything working together in order to do their best to avoid disasters. And to make this positivity, to have these stories, to try and inspire people, we are collecting them on this website, disastersavoided.com, to really say we can make those choices, we can make those decisions. Let's come together and provide options and opportunities in order to show what can and should be done, in order to apply what knowledge we have and what resources we have in order to avoid disasters. Very much leading to the key messages, which we're trying to work everywhere from the head of the UN agencies to basically people in the street who are interested in supporting their own localities, their own communities, to distill them into the points. Simply avoid the phrase natural disasters. There's actually hashtags, hashtag no natural disasters, hashtag disasters are not natural. Call them disasters, call them what they are. All are human-made disasters. And this takes time, which is why it's people, places, and times. It takes a long time to have a corrupt government. It takes a long time to set up a warning system. The Pacific back in 1949. Toronto creating a city within a park is how they market themselves. A city within a park from 1954. The earthquake, of course, happened suddenly. The tornado, maybe you have days of warning, but touchdown, you'll have minutes of warning that you need to get to shelter. That's just the earthquake or the tornado. The disaster took a long time. All disasters happen slowly. Meaning that the phrase disaster event is as bad as the phrase natural disaster. All disasters are long-term social processes. They happen slowly, they are not natural, they are about us. Which, of course, I put together brilliantly in my absolutely wonderful book, Disaster by Choice. You too can make the choice to purchase a dozen copies. There are only 259 shopping days until Christmas. And if you happen to be out on a tropical beach looking out for tsunamis, they're great for killing mosquitoes, which is absolutely avoiding disasters. And now, available in German as part of decolonization to get away from this Englishification. And I'm about to get the Russian proofs, which is not very helpful since I don't speak Russian. It was the same with the German proofs. They sent them to me and said, have we translated it okay? I don't know what languages, but hey, it should be good enough. Thinking about what we can and should do to avoid disasters, to do better, to try and ensure that people make those choices, to think ahead of disaster before it is too late. Because our schools should be safe. Our schools should be safe for learning, safe for working, safe for teaching. And this was a school on that border town where several people were killed when a tornado went through. They were just so, quote, lucky, unquote, the tornado went through after school hours, or there would have been multiple fatalities among students and staff. But yet you see what withstood the tornado. And when we think about disasters, when we think about choices, is a real disaster the fact that they built a school in Tornado Alley without making it resistant to tornadoes? Or that kids in their everyday place of education are exposed to commercial product full of sugar and caffeine? What choices are made as geographers with geography? How can we do better for positivity? Because yes, it is over time and for the long term. Our careers last 30, 40 years. What positive difference can we make? It's for the places we are in, whether it's our locality, where we are, where we live and work, or when we're traveling for work or pleasure. Ultimately coming down to people. Disasters are by people. Avoiding disasters is by people. When we try and change disaster by choice to no disaster by choice, that is up to you, that is up to us. Perhaps it is not so much geography making a positive difference as geography teachers making a positive difference. Thank you for doing so.
Thank you, that was absolutely inspirational. I've done a lot of work over my teaching career looking at disasters, and I read a lot of the things you do, and I've learned so much from that session. That's been absolutely wonderful, thank you. We've got some time for questions, so if anyone's got questions, I shall run down with the microphone.
Of course it'd be me. Yeah.
Thanks, Ilan. That was amazing. I know you're aware of my work, but just what's happening in schools right now? It seems like schools are an unfolding disaster right now. That's been a long-term process. Everyone in the room knows the systemic issues that are causing that. And when it comes to climate change in our schools here in England, the top-down approach is not working. The government is not doing enough. There's not much safeguarding. So we need a bottom-up approach, and most people in this room are going to be the bottom-up approach. So can you give us any examples of inspiration where quite clearly a top-down approach to avoiding disaster has completely failed, but it's been a bottom-up, the grassroots that found success at protecting people? Just give some inspiration for our lovely teachers in the room.
Absolutely, because so much of disaster response happens locally. And the standard advice is be ready to be on your own for 72 hours. The reality is think about being on your own for 2 weeks or more before the government intervenes. The challenge is actually not so much people have not done that. The challenge is that most people in this country cannot afford to stockpile for 2 weeks. That's very much the disaster. But people have said if we do want local readiness, let's create community emergency response teams, CERT. And that's very top-down, dealing with professionals or making people professionals. One person said, well, let's start bottom-up, let's start in our schools. And with teenagers, did SERT, School Emergency Response Training. The basics of CPR, the basics of first aid, the basics of emergency response for teenagers. And found that actually CPR was the least used skill coming out of that training. what it did was instill a sense of civic responsibility. Suddenly the kids who were trained in basic first aid and disaster response were checking on their elderly neighbors weekly, were picking up litter in the streets, were inspired to volunteer. And it was so intriguing and a powerful lesson that focusing on the immediate, is it 15 to 2, is it 30 to 2, when do you ring 999 and so forth, actually led out to prevention. By finding out who is most vulnerable, why, how can we keep our streets and cities safe day to day? And then yes, if someone collapses in a plane or on the bus, then I know to do 15 to 2, I know when to ring 999. And I think that was so inspiring to be able to bring those skills and see that happening. It would be wonderful to say just do it, but as you said, which teacher in this room has spare time? And also being constrained by the curriculum. It's therefore going to be that balance about doing it on a community basis, trying to maybe bring it into the curriculum revisions which are underway, or saying what can we do within our day-to-day job without taking on more pressure, particularly asking the students themselves, what will inspire you? Do you want that CPR, or do you want to just say, knock on the door of your isolated elderly neighbor, and then find out what works best within the existing resources and system? So complements rather than being one addition.
Thank you very much. That was really thought-provoking. Anyone else got any questions? Oh, sorry.
And same front row if you have questions.
I have many questions, but I'll come talk to you. Main one, is your book illustrated?
The reason why that is such a leading question is because just before I said, do you want to form, or do you want to produce a graphic version of the book? And we also talked about the West End musical. When I was doing the original, the English version, with the editor and the publisher, I made a deliberate decision, actually no photos. And that was specifically to focus on the prose, partly to get people reading, but also partly to ensure that the wording was there. For the German version, they wanted some pictures, and there's a few in there. And the Russian version, they said for Russians, the more pictures, the better. And so there's about 12 pictures in the Russian version. Again, this is for feedback. If you think the English version should have had pictures, tell me, so that my next 17 books have definitely pictures. If you're happy saying, no, we want the kids to read, so keep it text, then of course that's fine too. If you think, your song or a musical version or a graphic version or a comic version would distract, maybe we don't do it. If it would complement, I can accelerate that. These are not for me. They're for you. So really, tell me what suits you.
Right, okay. Let's just move over to this side, please.
Thank you very much, really inspirational stuff. What confuses me is the way, I think the Gulf situation as it is, ships are not moving in and out because they can't get insurance. How on earth is it possible that in this country we've been building on floodplains and the like for years now, and yet the insurance industry doesn't say, don't do it. I'm not going to insure you, the risks are too high. What's going wrong here?
Yeah, people. Particularly for England, but also I think you related to the United Kingdom more generally. Historically, and this is a time part of geography, historically in 1961, all the insurance companies, the main insurance companies for homes, got together and basically had, it was a time obviously men of a certain demographic, had a gentleman's agreement that they were going to insure all homes in the UK. And that was 1961, which is why so many homes have been built on floodplains, because they would be insured. Following the 1998 floods and then the 2000 floods, they realized this was becoming untenable and insurers were on the verge of going bankrupt. They therefore started privately reneging on this gentleman's agreement And what they don't use the phrase in this country, but they basically started redlining in secret, basically drawing a red line and saying, we will insure here, we won't insure there, but not tell anyone. They then went through the phases in 2000 where, oh, you shouldn't be redlining, oh, but we're not doing it, we are doing it, and also recognizing that they could lobby governments to try and avoid too many homes on floodplains. Politically, look at house prices. Look at the housing shortage. Politically, there has to be house building. And even up on Kelm Island, if any of you did the tour, I was walking there yesterday and I saw all those new builds, which look very nice houses. I also saw the floodgate at the end of Kelm Island. And it's an old industrial site. Before purchasing there, I would definitely want to look at remediation. If you're a politician, we need houses and we need affordable and safe houses. Where in England do you build? Areas of outstanding national beauty, sites of special scientific interest, national trust, national parks, local parks, floodplains, landslide areas, dam break inundation zones, coasts due to sea level, where do you build? It's a real struggle. And insurers go back and forth and won't always tell you what they're doing. And they have this history. So you build and then it can't be insured, or you build and it's insured and the insurance company goes bankrupt and the government becomes insurer of last resort. It's a real struggle. Certainly we could build in floodplains with houses which are flood resistant. Water comes in, camp out on the first floor for a couple of days, water goes out, clean, disinfect, you're fine. That's a cultural shift and a potential cost. To build every single new house which is entirely flood resistant, it means you cannot have carpets on your ground floor. It means you cannot have a usable basement. These are the balances. What's the solution? Become Prime Minister and decide.
This is always thought-provoking for me because I live on the Somerset levels. Right.
Ilan, that was so powerful. Thank you so much. A multi-layered question, if I may. Firstly, disaster is multifaceted in the way that we can measure it. Are there any indicators beyond the obvious ones as geography teachers that we may use in the classroom, such as death tolls and damage costs that we could perhaps consider? And just a slightly more personal question, what do you believe to be the greatest disaster of your lifetime and why?
In terms of the indicators, to me it's more about looking at the options and critiquing them. If you want, my contact details are there, I can give a card. If you want lists of how hard it is to count bodies in a disaster, I can give you those. So we're told, oh, 19 people died in this disaster, but it's remarkable how hard it is to actually count 19 bodies. Same with damage. How do we cost livelihood? How do we cost someone being out of home for 6 to 12 months? How do we price a life? I mean, the World Bank, who says that's about $1 million per life. So I asked someone, oh, if I give you $1 million, can I kill you? That World Bank person did not speak to me afterwards. So yeah, the indicators are there. The data are not good enough. Therefore, we need to teach, to critique and understand why they're not good enough. Greatest disaster of my lifetime? Well, I have a series of British Prime Ministers.
Sorry, our applause made the system go a bit strange there. Thank you ever so much for talking to us today. I think we're all going to go away feeling very inspired. And I just got a quick announcement from my wonderful Vice President Fiona.
Hello, so today I'm running the Future Geographers event in room 215. At 1 o'clock today, we have a hazard simulation. So if you are an ECT, new teacher, looking to come into teaching, we would love to have you in the room as we do have space for you. So please do come across if you would like to get involved in that. It's by Dr. Martin Parham from Manchester University, and it's going to be excellent. So please do come along if you can.
So the theme of this conference is Geography Making a Difference. I'm sure that you'll agree that Ilan has made a massive difference to us and also given us a big smile on our faces by telling us that we're playing an important role. So can I just say thank you once more.